Welcome to Occult Archives, where we uncover the mysteries, myths, and legends behind history's most feared books. From mystical grimoires to ancient religious texts, these books carry secrets too dangerous to be read. Are you ready to turn the pages of the unknown?
This is Season 1, Episode 6, Sefer Yetzirah, the mystical blueprint of creation. Let's dive in.
All right, so we're diving in some pretty intense material today, exploring the Sefer Yetzirah, or as it's also known, the Book of Creation or Formation. What we really want to get to the bottom of in this deep dive is what this book is all about, according to your sources, and why it's kind of captivated people's imaginations for so long.
Yeah, it really is remarkable how the sources present this text, the Sefer Yetzirah. It's not just some dusty old book, it's more like a how-to guide for a very specific kind of meditation. But this isn't your typical relaxation technique, oh no. We're talking about advanced concepts, almost like secret codes, that could potentially allow someone to influence the very laws of nature. And get this, some even believe it's one of the oldest books in existence.
Okay, so we're talking about a meditation manual with codes to manipulate reality. I mean, that sounds like something straight out of a movie, but here it is presented as a historical text. Now, one of your sources even mentioned something about reaching a state of super consciousness through it. Can you kind of break that down a bit for us? What exactly does that mean according to the material?
Absolutely. So one source describes the Sefer Yetzirah as like a roadmap for spiritual growth. It lays out these sophisticated techniques to basically boost your awareness to a whole new level. The goal is to move beyond your everyday consciousness and even beyond those altered states you might experience through certain practices into what they call superconsciousness. Now, this heightened state is linked to a concept in Kabbalah called chokhmah. Think of it as a state of complete unity where there's no separation, no conflicting ideas, just pure oneness. And this is contrasted with another state called bina, which is also elevated, but it still involves a certain degree of duality and discussion.
This is where it gets super interesting to me. The book seems to discourage any kind of deep discussion. One source actually calls it pill pool, which I love. And they say it represents a mind that's still stuck in duality, seeing things as separate. So the idea is that by going beyond that feeling of separateness, you can supposedly tap into this unified state of chokhmah. That's a pretty radical idea about how we understand things.
It really is. And what's fascinating is how this aligns with what another source describes as the core goal of authentic Kabbalah. It's about lifting us out of our normal sensory perception of the world, how we usually see things. And it takes us to a higher level of awareness where we start to perceive a single underlying force that governs all of nature, what many call the creator. So it's not just about agreeing on something intellectually, it's about transcending that whole feeling of being a separate self.
So it's not just about understanding with our minds, but a fundamental shift in how we experience reality itself. Now, your sources also mention some of the actual content of the book. They talk about the Sefirot of the Tree of Life, the power of combining Hebrew letters, and how it all connects to the universe, the soul, even the stars, all tied to divine thought. It's presented as a kind of divine engineering, almost like knowledge that humans couldn't have figured out on their own.
Right. One source really emphasizes that the Sefer Yetzirah provides very specific techniques related to the Sefirot. These are like fundamental attributes or emanations of the divine, and it delves into the profound significance of combining the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. This knowledge is seen as a direct link to divine intelligence, a divine engineering that could only have been received through extraordinary means like extrasensory perception or direct prophetic connection. They give the example of Abraham Avinu.
Abraham Avinu, who transitioned from astrologer to Kabbalist. That's quite a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Bezalel, who supposedly used combinations of Hebrew letters to create physical objects. I mean, these are some pretty big claims about the practical applications of this knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. If we kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture, one source even suggests that studying the Sefer Yetzirah could unlock what they call mental powers, allowing a person to interact with the cosmos almost like using a computer. You gain access to this extrasensory realm, and this idea ties back to transcending the limitations of natural laws by achieving that unified consciousness.
So here's a big question that comes up. If this book supposedly holds such incredible power, why isn't it more widely known or practiced in this way? One of your sources mentions that this knowledge was actually fiercely guarded by Jewish mystics, the Essenes, for centuries,
Yeah.
and those secrets were never openly shared.
Exactly. The oral tradition surrounding the Sefer Yetzirah predates the Talmud, and it was intentionally kept under wraps for centuries. But what's even more interesting is that in later periods, like the 10th and 13th centuries, some Kabbalists deliberately put out misleading interpretations, almost like decoys, to confuse anyone who might try to misuse its power for what they considered black magic. The idea was to make sure that only those deeply rooted in the Zohar, another foundational Kabbalistic text, could really understand its true meaning.
So we're dealing with a book considered so powerful that its understanding was actively concealed, even distorted. Talk about intrigue. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the Tree of Life. Your sources explain that the Sefer Yetzirah was really key in developing this concept, which is based on the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet and the 10 Sefirot, all connected by 22 paths totaling 32, a number that holds a lot of significance in the Torah.
And what's really cool here is the metaphorical interpretation that one source offers. They say, think of the tree of life as representing your soul. Each Sephira embodies a different virtue. But then there's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which represents our physical body with all its senses that can sometimes be deceptive. And the interplay between these two trees is crucial to the Kabbalistic understanding of ourselves and the world. Think of it as a map of your inner world.
I love that. A map of our inner world. So there's this concept of unity versus plurality. Knowledge in its purest form, Chokhmah, is presented as this unified divine thought. But then its manifestation in the world through the Sefirot is Bina, a state of plurality, of many different expressions, almost like white light being split into all the colors of the rainbow through a prism. The underlying energy is one, but it expresses itself in so many ways.
That's a great way to put it. And according to one source, ascending in consciousness is essentially about transforming that plurality back into unity, moving beyond the way we normally see the world through our senses, which is all about duality, separation. Nature itself, referred to as Elohim in this context, represents that state of plurality. But then miracles are associated with a level of unity that transcends that dualistic perception. It's like stepping outside the normal laws of nature.
Okay, so the Sefer Yetzirah is kind of like a guide to achieving this state of unity. One source uses this really vivid imagery. They say it's about learning to ride the universe instead of being tossed around by its apparent chaos, like learning to control a horse with reins. And the different permutations of the names of God are seen as the key to understanding how God manifests in all of creation. And since we're like microcosms of the cosmos, our own bodies are said to correspond to these cosmic forces.
And what's important for us to get is the practical implication of all this. One source suggests that by understanding this connection between the macrocosm and the microcosm, we can learn how our head, which represents consciousness, should guide our feet, our actions in the world. So we're not just living on autopilot, driven by unconscious habits.
I love the analogy of the 6 days of creation representing the physical body and the 7th day Shabbat representing consciousness. Such a clear way to see that relationship between the material and spiritual. And the way the Torah describes the creation of humanity, first in the image of creation and then the God's image, that subtle shift really highlights the interplay between natural law and our conscious awareness.
One source brings up this really intriguing concept of a fifth dimension, and it's not about a physical dimension, but the ascension of consciousness beyond the 4 dimensions we know: height, width, length, and time. They suggest that this ascension can be achieved by meditating on the permutations of Hebrew letters, a practice called ziruf, which leads to greater peace, love, compassion, and spiritual wisdom.
Permutations of letters. It's like taking a word like Bereshit, the first word of Genesis, and rearranging the letters to uncover hidden meanings. One source calls it developing our spiritual muscle of love. It sounds like a very active and engaging form of meditation.
It is, and they give examples like the word Israel, which can be rearranged to reveal deeper meanings like Rosh Lai, meaning my head, or the idea that the name itself contains 231 possible permutations. This practice is described as a way to spark major leaps in consciousness and potentially unlock extrasensory abilities.
It's fascinating how one source contrasts Moshe Rabbeinu, who reached the level of Bina, with the potential for the Messiah to reach Chokhmah, suggesting different levels of spiritual attainment and their impact on humanity. The Sefer Yetzirah is even presented as the manual to this 5th dimension, holding the key to the redemption of humanity.
However, there's another source that offers a slightly different perspective. It's grounded in what they call authentic Kabbalah. And they suggest that while the Sefer Yetzirah is a crucial Kabbalistic text attributed to Abraham, although its authorship is debated, it was written at a time when the overall level of human desire was much lower than it is today. So they argue that later Kabbalistic texts like those of the Ari and Baal Hasulam, which go into much greater detail, are actually more effective for spiritual growth in our current era where desire is so much more amplified.
So while the Sefer Yetzirah lays the foundation, it might not be the most practical guide for us modern folks. We might need those later, more comprehensive texts to really tap into its wisdom. It's not just about understanding the words, but about connecting with spiritual forces that are relevant to our current state.
Exactly, and this highlights the importance of lineage and the evolution of Kabbalistic understanding. This idea of a single soul passed down through key Kabbalists throughout history, all striving for the highest level of spiritual attainment. The Sefer Yetzirah is like an early expression in this unique language of Kabbalah. It describes fundamental spiritual structures, but to really get it, we need the insights of those later works.
This gives us a much richer understanding of the Sefer Yetzirah's place in the grand scheme of Kabbalistic thought. It's not just some old book, but a living text with layers of meaning and different ways of approaching it across time.
And you know what's really interesting is what one source says about the physical form of the book itself, the paper, the ink, the act of engaging with the physical text. They suggest it holds a unique connection to the spiritual roots of creation, the author's intention, the essence of the story. It's like there's something deeper you can get from interacting with these ancient texts in their physical form that you might miss on a screen, a deeper resonance with the knowledge they contain.
So for you, the listener, what does all this mean? The Sefer Yetzirah is a testament to humanity's age-old desire to understand creation and our place in it. It offers a powerful system for spiritual growth through these unique forms of meditation, the mystical power of language, and the pursuit of unified consciousness. And while the most effective way to engage with these ideas might be through the lens of later Kabbalistic thought, it's still a fascinating journey to explore.
What's amazing is how relevant these ancient concepts still are today. Whether you see the Sefer Yetzirah as a direct guide or a foundation that needs further interpretation, it sparks those deep questions about reality, consciousness, and the potential for transformation. And the different perspectives on its accessibility and how Kabbalistic language has evolved highlight the dynamic nature of spiritual wisdom. It adapts to our changing desires and understanding.
As one source beautifully puts it, the very substance of a physical book and its carefully crafted letters have a unique link to the source of creation, the author's heart, and the very soul of the story, something we might not fully grasp in our digital world. There's a certain wisdom embedded in those ancient forms of knowledge transmission.
This raises a really important question for you to consider. In our world overflowing with digital information, what is the lasting power of these physical texts, especially the ones that claim to hold such profound spiritual secrets? And how do those ancient concepts of consciousness and unity resonate with our modern scientific understanding of the universe and ourselves? Especially when we consider the Kabbalistic idea of evolving human desire and the development of spiritual teachings throughout history.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Sefer Yetzirah. We hope this exploration has given you some new insights and something to think about. Until our next uncovering of hidden knowledge.
Thank you for tuning into Occult Archives. If you're ready to delve deeper into the mysteries behind history's most feared books, join us next time.
Dare to turn the page of the unknown.